Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed?
"21 years and one day later, 9/11, changed everything for me, changed a lot for a lot of the world. We're going to be talking about that today, doing a pulse check. See where we are. Where are we at in the country? What's going on? My name is Jarrin Jackson. Good morning. I am a Bible-believing Christian, and for me it is always about the gospel of Jesus Christ, the death, the burial, the resurrection. It's 55 degrees today in Claremore. It's cold. It's good. It's fall. It's a good time. 9/11 always struck me. I was 16 when the towers fell. I was in high school, junior. I was a junior in Ulaga High School. I watched the towers get hit. I saw the second tower get hit live on television. I remember making fun of whoever was stupid enough to fly a plane into the first one. Me and a lot of other high school students grouped inside of Miss Oakley's class, the speech and debate room there in Ulaga High School, and we watched it on the television. After the second plane hit, my heart fell into my stomach. We had to go to class. I skipped school for the rest of the day. Had something later that day, had a field trip later that day, but I skipped school in the morning and I went back home. I drove my white 1991 Dodge Dynasty, White Lightning, back to the house, and I watched on live television the two towers fall. I cried like a little girl. I was scared. I was afraid. It was the first time in my life that America had been attacked on that level. Of course, I had heard of the Oklahoma City bombings in 1995, which hit close to home. My uncle was tangential to that. But I was 16. 9/11 happened. The two towers fell. Now, just a quick note about me. The only person in my family that had ever served in the military was my grandfather. He served in World War II. Like most people at his time did. So when 9/11 happened, I wasn't a military-minded person. I did not come from a veteran home. When I saw the towers fall, I got angry. And it was from that, at that point, I had a discussion with my wife yesterday. For the last 21 years, I have personally been in this cycle of using anger to identify a goal, and then using anger, channeling that anger to accomplish those goals. It's driven me. It's allowed me to accomplish things I probably would never have. I was the first one at Ulaga Talala Public School to go to West Point. Since thereafter, there's been a ton of people that have gone to West Point and service academies after that. See, just at the local level in the small town Oklahoma, it was unheard of for anyone to go from podunk schools to these service academies to go serve. After that, there was a lot of other people. But the anger is the thing that drove me. Anger against my enemies. I told myself, and I still tell myself from time to time, that injustice and tyranny is something that drives me. Not that I want to do it, but that whenever I see it, I have to smash it. 16-year-old Jarrin Jackson decided that he needed to go into the Army to go kill America's enemies. I chose West Point, not because I thought I could do it, but because my dad didn't want me to enlist in the Marine Corps. And because he didn't want me to enlist in the Marine Corps, he wanted me to bypass and miss the beginning stages of the global war on terror. Little did we both know that 9/11 kicked off 20 years of overseas armed conflict, military adventurism throughout the planet. I went to West Point because my dad said, go get a college education. So we did. I looked at the best place to go to lead soldiers, and that's what I chose. Not because I wanted to necessarily, but because as a compromise with my father, he didn't want me to go in the military. I wanted to go kill bad guys. That was what we got on. And the idea of going to West Point being the best place that you could go to join the Army and be an officer, part of me suspects that they didn't think that I could get in. It took me 2 years to get in. I chose the infantry. I chose the 101st. I went through Ranger School. I went through Airborne School. I did everything that I thought that I needed to do to get as close to the enemy of the United States as I possibly could. Whenever I got there in January of 2010, I got to Eastern Afghanistan. And over the next 13 to 14 months, I had plenty of opportunity to use my training, to unleash my anger. I had plenty of opportunity to stare the enemies, who I thought the enemies of the United States of America were, face to face. I remember looking at dead bodies with flies buzzing around their face of people that were previously alive, but now not. They were dead. And I remember looking at them going, you're dead, and I'm not. You hate America, and that's why you're dead. That was the way my 24-year-old brain processed things at the beginning of my first combat deployment. Over that deployment, we would evacuate over 30 men due to combat injury, gunshot wounds, explosions, head trauma. On July 12, 2010, one of the bunkers that was on the base that was at the little fire base out in the middle of nowhere, one of the bunkers was made with that really crap Afghan concrete, the type where you could just scrape your finger and it would fall off. July 12, 2010, a rocket hit this with 35 Americans inside. We evacuated 31 of them. One of them, a guy named Specialist Kingsley, lost his left leg. As we were pulling him from the bunker, it was bad. I walked in there, or I actually ran in there. It was clouded with dust. There was blood caked on the wall. There was flesh all over the place. Bloodied Americans, most of which couldn't cry because they were so traumatized in their heads that they didn't know how to make sense of things. And over the next 4 hours, we conducted a mass casualty evacuation of the base. There were only 60 people on the base, but yet we evacuated 31. Think about that. Half of the people that were on the base we evacuated. It took multiple iterations of Chinook helicopters to load masses of groups on the helicopter. I wrote up Valorous Awards that day for a guy. I'll keep his name quiet, but I wrote a Valorous Award for a guy whose back was sizzling with shrapnel in it. His shirt was melting. The fabric wasn't even burning. It was melting into his skin. And I wrote him a Valorous Award unit because whenever the medic went up to him and offered him medical coverage, that soldier looked at the other guy that had other guys sticking their fingers in his leg to stop the bleeding. He said, help that guy first. So my first deployment, I endured, I went through a lot of crap. And I did it as a direct result of 9/11. Those memories, those actions, My behavior, my development, my progression, all of that happened as a result of what happened on 9/11. 9/11 doesn't happen, Jarrin doesn't go into the Army. Jarrin doesn't go into the Army, doesn't go to Afghanistan, doesn't see and do the things that I've done and I've seen. It grew me up. Eastern Afghanistan was where I became a man. That's where I grew up. It's where I put into action all these things. Years later, now that I have children, now that I'm, outside of the military, I run businesses, I talk to people, I read the Bible a lot more than I used to. I look at that and I say, the sin and the evil that happened on 9/11 motivated me in my anger, justified though I thought it was, to do something. And then it didn't hit me until years later that Tower 7 fell. Tower 7. For those of you all not quite up to speed, just go look. Why did Tower 7 fall on 9/11? You could imagine my fury. You could imagine my rage. You could imagine the betrayal. That whenever you put an American in a body bag because he got killed as a result of direct action, you look at people who made decisions, who knew things, to send us over there. And that is just infuriating to me. Not infuriating that I'm going to go do anything. And in fact, the people that are most... the people that are best for America right now are her combat veterans. The men, the women who joined the military or who served in the military in the global war on terror. Not because we served in the military, though I think that's a big part of it, but because we served in the military with a mission that was unwinnable. In a war that was purposefully deceitful and sold to the American people on lies. We killed people that didn't need killing because we were told to go there by people who knew exactly what they were doing, and they themselves were too cowardly to put the uniform on. Or if they put the uniform on, they had aliases and they did jobs overseas that were going to put them in danger. How many high-profile politicians were actually infantry officers? Not many. But it goes more than that. It goes to the idea that after 9/11, the country, from my 16-year-old brain at the time, and looking back on it, indeed, there was a unity there. And the unity was because that generally most Americans acknowledged the fact that our home was just attacked. That it was the obvious nature of destroying 2 buildings in downtown New York City was an overture that you didn't really have to be so intelligent to understand geopolitics to know that ain't right. And over the course of the next couple years, there was this actualized anger. I know for me that was the case. I know that whenever I looked at a map, planned out with my platoon sergeant an ambush, and we deliberately and methodically laid in a offensive structure, an offensive positioning for men to kill other men, and then we did it, you got to think, how many deliberate ideas happened as a result of 9/11? How many lives were changed? How many things forever were changed? Now, I've got media up here. I've got pictures and I've got video and stuff like that. But I can't. It's as I start talking about it, it's irrelevant because things kind of went the other way. This is the benefit of the live stream. One of the things that changed my life the most was on November 8, 2010. Andrew Hutchins was killed. He was my soldier. He was at Sabari with me. He was a military police soldier that had just been transitioned to my platoon. Speaking to him in a guard tower, we had just done shift change. So one of my soldiers had just stepped off, and Hutch got on. In the conversation, I was the last guy to talk to him. The conversation was just about going home. We were 45 days from going home. And he took a rocket. I won't explain because I've the details have never been discussed publicly, so I'm not going to publicly discuss them. But he was killed. And I remember sitting in a bunker with him for about an hour, waiting for the medevac helicopter, because whenever you're alive, they try to have the golden hour. They try to get you out of the combat zone if you're wounded because you're alive. But if you're dead, there's no rush. And I sat there with him in the bunker, me knowing that he's dead because I'm right there. I'm right there with him. But knowing, having just talked to him, that his wife is pregnant halfway around the world, that his father, that his family is halfway around the world, and they have no idea. They have no idea that this guy's dead. And that sticks with me. Because there's certain things that I've done that I know that I do them, but I don't yet, or that the people that I've done them against, or their full effect hasn't yet been actualized. And I guess the idea that I'm trying to get at is the things that happened as a result of 9/11, the national unity, the deploying of military overseas, they're still having ripple effects. And I think one of the most important things we can do today is to pursue the truth. And to not abuse it, or to lie, or to deceive, or to manipulate. I am now 37. It's 21 years after 9/11, and I feel betrayed and manipulated by my government. I feel targeted by people who disagree with me, not because we disagree, but because they have characterized what I believe as being anti-American. This is one of the Bronze Stars. This is one of my Bronze Stars. That's one of my Bronze Stars that I was awarded for serving overseas. I have 2. Honorable discharge. And yet, people in my country, people in my government would call me an enemy. People in my government would call me someone who hates America and wants to do violence to my fellow Americans. That's the furthest thing from the truth. I'm going to play a clip. You have a sitting U.S. Senator. This guy's name is Warner. Listen to what he has to say. This is a guy that is using political manipulation to continue to drive a wedge and divide Americans. I'm going to play this little bit of commentary after. Watch this.
9/11 introduced to many Americans for the very first time this sense of vulnerability at home, and it launched the global war on terror. I wonder how vulnerable you think America is now. Are we paying enough attention to the Middle East and to Afghanistan?
Well, Margaret, I remember, as most Americans do, where they were on 9/11. I was in the middle of a political campaign, and suddenly the differences with my opponent seemed very small in comparison. And our country came together. And in many ways, we defeated the terrorists because of the resilience of the American public, because of our intelligence community. And we are safer, better prepared. The stunning thing to me is here we are 20 years later, and the attack on the symbol of our democracy was not coming from terrorists, but it came from literally insurgents attacking the Capitol on January 6th. So I believe we are stronger. I believe our intelligence community has performed remarkably. I think the threat of terror has diminished. I think we still have new challenges in terms of nation state challenges, Russia, and longer term, a technology competition with China. But I do worry about some of the activity in this country where the election deniers, the insurgency that took place on January 6th. That is something I hope we could see, that same kind of unity of spirit.
Shame on him. That piece of crap human being. Coward, low-life scum hiding behind a suit, talking on national television as though he's a moral arbiter of what's right and what's wrong. Just because people disagree with him, and just because he's overlooking and not publishing the facts of what's going on. The fact that the magnetically sealed doors were unlocked and opened by the D.C. Capitol Police, who fall under the jurisdiction of Nancy Pelosi, the Speaker of the House at the time. The false flags, the FBI informants, all the little different stuff. And the reason why I believe this stuff, the reason why I look into that, is because as a young lieutenant in eastern Afghanistan, I had weapons developers, research and development. People from the CIA came out to my base, Sabari, Afghanistan, and they gave us Generation 1 Switchblade technology. We were the very first people in the entire world to fire and put into action the Switchblade. Counterfire system that directly targeted enemy point of origins. If we got shot, if rockets were shot at us, this technology that is now a multi-billion-dollar technology in its 5th generation is used to counterfire and go directly against the enemy. I was one of the very first ones to put it into action. 2010. Sold to the U.S. government for billions of dollars, and yours truly was in the playground, the testing facility, the experiment, the battlefield where our weapons are developed. where government agencies give them to young infantry officers to put them into action and then to, quote, tell us how it works. I was part of that. I was part of that military-industrial complex. You can't unsee after you kill somebody with a innovative, designed technology that's cutting edge, so much so that no one else knows about it. There's not even a freaking user manual for it. And then this guy has the gall to go on and say that election deniers and people that were insurgents, the insurrectionists, that dude's a coward. I want to point out there's a firefighter. Here's a clip from a firefighter in New York City. It ends with a curse word, so if you got kids that don't want the F word saying, it's going to happen. But here is a firefighter speaking about the duplicity and the double standard of how he was treated, how he's no longer able to serve in New York City as a firefighter as a result of medical protocol, but also he's got one parting jab for 9/11. Watch this.
Okay, I gave my best years to this city. 20 years, from 21 to 41, and then they take it away at the peak of my earning career. I made it to captain. I went through that process. You should be ashamed of yourselves. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Eric Adams is going to be on the wrong side of history. The people who look by are the same people who thought slavery was okay. The same people who thought segregation in Shea Stadium was okay.
Thank you very much,
You
sir.
segregated us. I was allowed to work in this city, but I wasn't allowed to eat in a restaurant in this city.
Thank you very
I
much.
was allowed to work through the pandemic, but I wasn't allowed to eat in a restaurant. I could wear the uniform, go to a burning building, but not eat here.
Thank you
What's
very much,
wrong
sir.
with you people? Trust the science. You guys are fucked up.
Yeah, so a lot of passion, a lot of deliberate passion for people who serve other folks and then don't get the equal treatment by their government. So the pulse check of 9/11, 21 years after, is that the national unity isn't here, and that the people, it seems, the people who have a history of serving in uniform and serving their country and being decorated, whenever they come back and they give what their opinions are, if their opinions and their perspectives go against the people who they mostly did not serve, if the people who have served in uniform have an opinion and are expressing it, and it goes against the approved opinion of the day, once you stop serving the government, you're no longer useful for the government. My perspective isn't important. As a 16-year-old kid, America really needed me to join the military. America really needed me to learn how to kill people. America really needed me to get as close as possible and put myself on the front lines and do violence to people who I have no idea their first name. Sure was killing them, though. They had no idea what was about to happen, but they sure needed me to be evacuating combat injured. There's a usefulness for people who wear the uniform. Whenever they get out and start telling the truth, that's when they become dangerous. Speaking of dangerous, there is a perspective that if you disagree with, you are considered an enemy. I want to play a montage for you, a 2-minute montage of people who used to think one way, but now think a different way. The pandemic of the unvaccinated. This is the American elected leaders from one political persuasion. Commentary follows.
We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin, and your refusal has cost all of us.
People who are incubators for every variant to come, walking around lawfully unvaccinated? That's psychotic.
For the unvaccinated, you're looking at a winter of severe illness and death. For yourselves, your families, and the hospitals you may soon overwhelm.
About this, in a world of threats and tyrants and terror, you know what our biggest enemy is in America? Our fellow Americans.
They are the ones that are propagating this outbreak.
Being frustrated that there is still a percentage of the population who are not vaccinated.
I wish that he would go further to restrict the activities of the unvaccinated.
Vaccinated person having a heart attack? Yes, come right on in. We'll take care of you. Unvaccinated guy who gobbled horse goo? Rest in peace, Wheezy.
That 25% can cause a lot of damage, and they are.
If you're willing to walk among us unvaccinated, you are an enemy.
Well, it's my rights. Okay. But I don't care.
The pandemic of the unvaccinated.
Well, look, the only pandemic we have is among the unvaccinated. And they're killing people.
Freedom not to follow the facts, even if your freedom kills people? What kind of freedom is that? What kind of freedom do they really want?
We have a pandemic because of the unvaccinated, and they're sowing enormous confusion. The unvaccinated overcrowd our hospitals, are overrunning emergency rooms and intensive care units, leaving no room for someone with a heart attack or pancreatitis or cancer.
Shouldn't they have to pay more into the system because they are collapsing our health system? They're the ones in the ERs.
Require vaccination universally. Have the military run it. If you don't want to get vaccinated, you better be ready to prove your conscientious objector status in court.
It's almost like it's going to be two Americas.
Two Americas is one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is there are people that benefit off of controlling what goes into the eyes and into the ears for the key terrain of the mind. That's how I look at it. Everybody who has an audience, everyone who's trying to glommer on and fight for attention and push a message is trying to have impact for some purpose. Cui bono? Who benefits? For me, I am going to shamelessly tell you that I believe in Jesus Christ, his death, his burial, his resurrection. I don't want people to go to hell. That's what I want to do. That's why we don't have sponsors, that's why we don't do promo codes, we don't do any of that stuff, because I want to subject all commentary, cultural commentary, political commentary, financial, military, whatever, to the cross. Because that's what I believe. Because that's what I think is most important. You should do the discernment to figure out why people are telling you what they're telling you. But this bifurcation, this two Americas. Here is the Witch of the West, Jacinda Ardern. She is the Prime Minister of New Zealand. Now, New Zealand is one of the most tyrannical lockdown countries that there was. And yet Jacinda, dear Queen, had this to say earlier today.
People will use masks for their own individual reasons. They may personally be vulnerable. They may have events they want to make sure they're not unwell for. They may not have had COVID-19. We all just need to respect everyone's individual decisions.
She's a World Economic Forum alum. She's got really big teeth, and she's always doing the smile thing because that's how she controls people. It's a spell. It's a technique. If you're always talking like this and you're always smiling, people are going to be like, yeah, I really like this guy. I really like that woman who looks like a horse. But she's saying respect other people's decision. Now, Hillary Clinton, she went on Newscast yesterday, and she was also speaking about division. You know what? I don't want to play Hillary. I can't stand the scratch. What we'll do is we'll cover the fact that Hillary last week, she went on a newscast yesterday before she went on. She's launching a podcast because no one really cares. But she's saying Hillary declares as many Republicans possible must lose for good of the United States. GOP must purge disease. And yet 2 days later, she was talking about. And I don't want to play the clip because I don't really want to listen to it, but I have it if you wanted me to. She's talking about purging GOP people because now the majority of the GOP support Trump. The majority of the GOP don't like the way that the direction of the country is headed. And most people question the 2020 election. So Hillary, being someone who benefits from a system of in the eyes and in the ears for the domination, the key terrain of the mind for the prize of the soul that gets people corrupted, distracted, gaslit from the truth, she's going to be saying to purge the people, and we need to have bipartisanship. This is garbage. But she's doing this because there is a new docuseries. Following the announcement of the launch of her new Apple TV Plus docuseries, Gutsy, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton has made a return to the press circuit, most recently condemning the Republican Party during an interview with Forbes Newsroom. Clinton, lost Donald Trump, declared during her sit-down that every Republican possible must lose their next election bid for the good of the country. She called the GOP an ideological partisan minority and suggested a good portion of them support the violent behavior displayed on the January 6th riot at the Capitol. The Forbes host said that many business executives she talks to are upset with the polarization of the country, and she asked Clinton what the role of the elected leader should be in order to find common ground. So many assumptions baked in there that I don't like. First of all, we started out this little clip with the montage of people saying that people who were unvaccinated, that was the pandemic. Targeting people for having their own private medical decision that was not liked by the powers that was. That's just not right. Then you got Jacinda, Wicked Witch of New Zealand, starting to say that people have to respect their opinion. Here's what I think. I think that freedom is winning out. People don't like to be told what to do. And as a result of it, now you've got people that were trying to oppress and usher in some type of totalitarian medical tyrant system are now shifting back towards we need to have partisanship and common ground. I'll be at peace with you as long as you share my viewpoint. So goes Hillary Clinton. This is a trope of tyrants. This is the way that these people are going to try to manipulate folks. And the people that listen to them have Stockholm's syndrome. The people that listen to them are themselves victims. They're hostages. And they just don't know it. Which is why you have to continue to tell people the truth. That's why me, Jarrin, is going to continue to try to bring the gospel and the Bible into collision with the way of the world. And specifically the way that we examine current daily events. Because that's how I interpret the world. That's how I try to make sense of things. Otherwise, you have a double standard, hypocritical, holier than thou, entitled political class that doesn't seem to have any effort of accountability, but has every ambition to terrorize and to oppress their political opposition. How do you make sense of that? They either A, want to provoke false flag, B, they want to stoke civil strife, war, or they want to just crush their political enemies. This is a recipe for Jesus Christ. Otherwise, you get what these people seem to be pushing us all for. If I were to talk to you about Amalgamation Bank, you know what this is? I'm about to submit to you an idea that is so dangerous, and I doubt most people will talk about it. Stay with me on this one. Amalgamation Bank is the bank of changemakers. If you could wrap AOC and the Justice Squad into a bank, weaponize them to take away fundamental rights of America and to undermine the freedom of the United States, this is it. Do not doubt me. What I'm about to say is I'm about to take a bank that is a social justice bank. They're targeting people. They're targeting the Second Amendment. They're targeting free speech. And ultimately, I believe that they are ushering in a digital currency so that they could have social control. This is the bank for changemakers. We're the bank of people who care about the money does in the world. When you deposit your money at Amalgamated, it supports sustainable organizations, progressive causes, and social justice. We're committed to environment and social responsibility. We are net zero, powered by 100% renewable energy. We have a long, proud history of providing affordable access to the banking system, supporting immigrants and affordable housing, and being a champion of workers' rights. If you needed any more after hearing and reading their About section, here is the CEO on CNBC. Watch this. This is the beginnings. This is the vanguard of debanking people. This is the vanguard of using our banking system to destroy freedom in the United States. Watch this.
It has been a battle for you. You made an application to do this earlier in the year. It was rejected. You went back at it, and then you got the support of all sorts of politicians around the country, attorneys generals and others, pension funds who actually sent letters to those to some of the credit card companies, asking them to disclose their position on it. What happened? What do you think what do you think really moved the needle here this time?
Well, I think it was awareness. I think most people had no idea that every single merchant category in the country, and in fact in the world, this is a global standard, had a merchant category code except firearms dealers.
How big a deal is this, and what do you think the implications are in terms of what has to happen next?
I think it's a big deal. I think it'll save lives, and that's pretty exciting. What has to happen next, now that the 3 credit card companies have said they will enact the code, the next thing that has to happen is that merchant banks have to actually utilize the code.
Priscilla Sims Brown is a social justice warrior who was given the opportunity to be CEO of a bank, and she's using that bank for social change. The social change she's talking about here is providing influence, political influence, to get the credit card companies, Visa, MasterCard, and the other one I can't think of, American Express, to accept card or the code purchases for firearms and ammunition. And then she goes on to say that the next step is to get merchant banks to go along with it. So follow this real fast. A bank with $6 billion in reserves, which is really not that big as far as banks go. So a small fish bank just lobbied, petitioned for, and got politicians, celebrities, businesses, and now the 3 major credit card companies to accept the premise that firearms and guns need special codes. They don't have special codes now, but now the 3 credit card companies have said that they want special codes. So the next step in the process is to get merchant banks to participate. Stop right here. The Live Local Field Manual speaks directly about this. Today is September 12, 2022. This was published in October of 2021, and on page 229, I talk about what I call BizBank. We, the people, need to bank with trustworthy institutions that serve Live Local instead of our enemy. Talks about providing products and understanding businesses for local producers. The important step is the local culture of consequence is working to have local businesses align with local banks. Why is this important? Because Priscilla Sims Brown, the social justice warrior wielding a bank, is now going to have the 3 credit card companies compel banks to recognize, or to compel merchants to recognize and to use codes that allow them to track firearms and ammunition. She goes further.
And what do you tell those viewers, and we were talking about it downstairs earlier, who say, look, I don't want to be tracked. I don't like the idea of tracking me. And that there are some people who say this goes against the Second Amendment. What do you tell those people?
Yeah. First of all, we don't track. Tracking is illegal, and it's also inappropriate. We cannot see what is being purchased in the store. We only know that purchases have been made. That's the first thing I'd say. Second thing I'd say is, bookstores, political organizations, religious organizations, all of these have merchant codes. And we have free speech rights in this country. No one is complaining about the loss of those free speech rights.
She's just a liar. She's a liar. First of all, she says, we don't track. That's illegal. I don't believe you. You're a bank. You're asking for specific codes that can be tracked by the code. If you didn't want to track, why ask for the code? Why ask for the merchant codes for firearms and ammunition if you didn't want to have some ability to track it? You're a liar, and I don't trust you. In the day and age of the internet, the day and age of all this chips and codes and trackers, do you really believe the bank that says that they're for social justice is not going to track the merchant codes or the consumer products or purchases of something that now is finally coded and tracked? You're a liar. And then to go on to say that there's books and there's churches and there's all these people and they've got freedom of speech and that no one is clamoring for their freedom of speech. Do you not recognize that I can't say exactly what I want to say because I'm streaming on platforms that will censor me for saying what I want to say? And if that is there on a platform that has federal protections, Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act of 1996, by the way, if the federal government is protecting monopolistic big tech companies, and monopolistic big tech companies with federal protections are not allowing me to express myself the way that I want to, do you think that there wouldn't be censorship, that now that you've entered the idea for a consumer code for firearms and weapons, that there won't be censorship on that as well, especially whenever it's to the political advantage of people who want to oppress freedom to get rid of the Second Amendment, and now you've given them that method? What's the next step in this? By the way, the Live Local Field Manual also has for it, what page is this on? This is on page 27. Page 27, I talk about doing a bank audit. The problem, we the people do not wage economic war through banking. Oh, what was that? Jarrin wrote, we need to wage economic warfare through banking more than a year before Priscilla Sims Brown is now weaponizing her bank to go after firearms. Live Local Field Manual, folks. She continues.
For this to work, if you will, and when I think we all want to save lives. I have children. A lot of people have children, teachers, Americans. Everybody wants this to work in this regard. There's some form of tracking that needs to go on because what you want is those suspicious patterns, buying patterns, to be identified in advance and for somebody to get a phone call.
That's right. So it happens two ways. One is we can reverse engineer a crime, right? We can reverse engineer what happened in mass shootings, what has happened with the proliferation of guns on the streets, right? Mm-hmm. And we can create algorithms that help detect those patterns. Secondly, we can sort of think about what people might do and create these patterns. Once these algorithms are created and we detect that suspicious activity has occurred, it is incumbent upon us. It is our obligation as a financial services firm to make sure that that activity is not happening on our rails. So we report to FinCEN. And we say
and
this
FinCEN is part of the Treasury Department.
That's right.
But then they have to then take that information, right, there's a number of steps. They have to take that information and call the local police authority or the FBI in that local district, right?
Yes.
And then they have to actually, then go either make a phone call or do something else.
Or determine that the suspicious activity we're reporting follows another program they're looking at or fits a mosaic that they've developed and then react to it.
Right.
Are you? Am I the only one hearing this? She's crazy. Listen to what she's. Let me try to simplify what she said. She wants to introduce the idea for purchase codes that doesn't exist, that she now has convinced the 3 major credit card companies to have on firearms and ammunition. She wants to then compel or leverage socially lean on cancel culture merchants and their banks to make sure that they start using them. And then whenever she's asked, aren't you going to track that? She's like, no, we're not tracking it. It's illegal. Then she goes on to say, yeah, we'll have to track it. And then don't worry, we're going to create an algorithm. And an algorithm that relies the data that they're tracking is going to be based on what? She's going to reverse engineer mass shootings. What does that mean? That means that whenever a sinner decides to go murder people and they happen to use a firearm, unlike, a bunch of immigrants in London that are stabbing people with knives, we're not going to focus on the other types of murders using other types of weapons. We're only going to focus on the murders of the sinners who are choosing to use firearms. And because of that, we're going to reverse engineer and we're going to find out the time that, when were they able to purchase this gun? And if we're able to do that, we're able to algorithmically track it. She even said that we'll just be able to think about it. We'll just be able to think about it, says the woman that has the website that says this. That they're sustainable, they're net zero, they're this, providing affordable access to banking systems, supporting immigrants, affordable housing, and being a champion of workers' rights. No. Progressive causes and social justice. The woman that's saying that she's a supporter of progressive causes and social justice is just going to be able to think about how to create an algorithm that is now going to be able to track purchase codes for people with firearms and ammunition. And then she says at the very end, it's going to be linked to the Treasury Department. And the Treasury Department is going to be talking to law enforcement. Live Local Field Manual, if you can't talk about it, amen. Live Local Field Manual on page 201, the Sheriff Strategy. We, the people, haven't formalized our relationships with sheriffs to defend Constitution against tyranny and rights violations. What this woman is talking about is a weaponized form of pre-banking, a thought crime that arbitrarily dictates and targets people who purchase firearms and ammunition. That's what she's doing. That's what she's talking about. She's talking about creating social change in banking so that she can change the banking infrastructure to target and maliciously be predators against people who want to participate in the Second Amendment by buying firearms and ammunition. I could also put in a shameless plea for veteran guns and ammo at veteranammo.store, link in the description, but come on! What is she doing? She's bringing social change to banking. And Priscilla Mims Brown fits the profile of someone who could do this and not get criticism. I'll let you figure that one out. They're coming, folks. And she had to be dog-walked through that explanation in order to use words and frame it in such a way that wouldn't be offensive to people that just want to be left alone. Just give me my constitutional rights, folks. Leave me alone. I don't want your social justice and online banking with your algorithm and your merchant codes and coming after my firearms and ammunition. Leave me alone. Oh, but Priscilla Sims Brown says that we should do it, so I don't want to be labeled a racist or a sexist or a bigot, so I can't say anything about the woman that wants to weaponize banks against people and their Second Amendment. Pierre Poilievre, Canadian conservative, won their nomination and is now going, he said something very simple. He wants the government to just run the post office, not people's lives. Watch.
And there are people in this country who are just hanging on by a thread. These are citizens of our country. We are their servants. We owe them hope. They don't need a government that sneers at them, looks down on them, calls them names. They don't need a government to run their lives. They need a government that can run a passport office.
Yeah, amen. What we really need, and so he's Canada, all right, so he's Canada. What we really need is a government to defend the Constitution. And the Constitution is built on the ideas laid out in the Declaration of Independence, and the Declaration of Independence says that the purpose of government is to defend God-given rights. I mean, that's why man forms government, is to secure God-given rights and our liberties. And the government derives its just powers from the governed, and not just from whimsical, arbitrary basis, like using algorithms to attack your ability to self-defend and create militia. Here is another person. He's a former Fed chairman, a former co-Fed chairman. Used to work in the Fed, a private entity, by the way. This guy's name is Claremore, and he's saying that we need, hear this, he's saying that America needs higher unemployment to fight inflation. Think about the contrast. You just had the guy say that they just want government to run the passport office. And here you have someone that used to work at the Fed, a private entity, talking about how they want higher unemployment to fight inflation. Commentary follows.
And then there's this idea from Jay Powell who says, you know what? We can get rid of job openings and not necessarily get rid of jobs. Where do you stand on that?
Well, as Jay and the committee has indicated, and I agree with, if you look at wage dynamics and other indicators, vacancies, unemployment, there is imbalance in the labor market. And so in order to bring it into balance, three things have to happen. You need to have some increase in participation, you need to have some reduction in vacancies, and you're probably going to have some rise in unemployment. The amount of rise in unemployment that the Fed will need in order to get inflation down will depend on how much we get on participation and how much we get on just firms reducing the number of vacancies. And there's no crisp or definitive answer to that question. But I do suspect that we're going to need to see a rise in unemployment north of what the Fed is currently marking down, which is about 0.5 percentage point. I would point out that in mild recessions in the past, and here's the R word, but if we do go into a recession, in mild recessions in the past, the unemployment rate has risen by less than 2%. So I think one issue about the R word right now is the last two recessions in 2008 and the pandemic were the two worst ones in 75 years. But we could have a downturn in the U.S. with just a sharp slowdown in growth and a modest rise in unemployment. And I think it's too soon to tell what will be required. But I do think it will be more of a rise than we've seen in the projections.
Is a recession your base case here?
I think that it may take a while for our friends at the NBER to call a recession, as you know, but I think it's probably about a coin flip right now.
In case, because I sped it up because it's a long time, his thought process is simple. Inflation is a problem. We need to counter inflation by having more people without jobs. Do you track what that means? Someone who used to work at the Fed, private entity, not accountable to Congress, who controls the amount that we spend, the amount that they print money. And this is the issue. Government is spending too much money that doesn't exist. That's creating inflation, not the fact that people have jobs. But the people who are with the big banks, that this guy is, the big banks are saying that they need more Americans to not have jobs. Follow their logic. The logic is that if you have a job, you have money. If you have money, you can buy stuff. If stuff is too expensive, what do? They don't stop printing money that doesn't exist. They want people to stop being able to work, so they stop having money, so people aren't able to buy stuff, so inflation goes down. Do you see how, on one hand, the people at the top with the big banks and the politicians, these people that are destroying stuff, are able to get access to money that doesn't exist just by printing it because they can, and they're not accountable to we the people. But then as to solve the problem, they need us, the little people, to not be able to work or make money so we can't buy stuff. And their thinking goes, the less discretionary income that we have, the more inflation will go down or be checked. That's how they think. That's exactly how they think, and that's what he's saying in smart terms. He's using banker language to disguise the fact that they want people to not have jobs so that they can fight inflation. That's how these people think. They hate you. They hate you. Dutch farmers have successfully gotten rid of their farming minister. This is from the AP. Dutch Farm Minister resigns after protest over pollution. The pull quote here is The Hague, Netherlands. The Dutch agricultural minister has unexpectedly resigned, telling reporters he wasn't the right person for the job following a tumultuous summer of protest by farmers over pollution regulations. It's more than just that. It goes all the way down to the fact that the government in the Netherlands was trying to convince people that they had to fight climate change. And in the process, British, they wanted to try to seize the farmers' land. Now, the farming land in the Netherlands is some of the most productive farmland in the world. But the farmers were able to stand up for themselves, push back against the government, and it seems to be that there's some type of change. We'll monitor that moving forward. I bring this up, and its relevance to me is the fact that farmers are the ones that produce the food. Your food security is national security. If you have not done live local and localized your food supply, then you are still vulnerable. Globalism is about extending the supply lines, making them vulnerable or brittle to control and attack, and people who are in the position to benefit from the elongated supply chain being disrupted, rerouted, or threatened, hostaged, if you will. Here in the United States, we've covered this before. There is an Amish man. His name is Amos Miller. Amos Miller runs a private membership association. This is something I advocate for in the Live Local Field Manual. Lancaster County farmers should be jailed for not paying fines related to food safety, the feds say. What is at stake here is someone who is living his religious belief, that of being an Amish farmer, and succeeding while living his religious belief. The Amish, they ain't use tractors. They use horse, plow, buggy, carriage, all that kind of stuff, right? And as they're doing this stuff, Amos Miller has a business partner who puts his goods up on the internet, and he had a private membership association with 4,000 customers all over the country. And people want natural food. They don't want food contaminated with drugs or steroids or insecticides or pesticides. People are starting to figure out that they want food the way God intended it, which is made not with a bunch of big pharma crap and all this big agricultural stuff, but because big ag controls and is one of the reasons why your food supply and food chain is so globalized and brittle. They don't like people who do it the natural way, because that's what the consumers want, and they can't compete with that. Amos Miller is a successful guy, and the feds have come after him. The feds have come after him because they've said that he's doing dangerous things, that he's leading to people getting killed. Where's the, is this the pull quote says? No, it's not that. That's just tallying up how much he gets. Is it this one? Yeah, okay, the very last paragraph there. I'm sorry, I'm jumping around. You can go read it. Go read him up. Miller first came to attention of the federal authorities in 2016 when the Food and Drug Administration, who is not in the Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, by the way. So you see how extra-constitutional, unconstitutional federal agencies, the Food and Drug Administration being one of those examples, is now getting in because it said it identified listeria in samples of Miller's raw milk. The agency found listeria to be genetically similar to the bacteria found in 2 people who developed listeriosis, one of whom died after consuming raw milk. Do you see what happened? Federal agency that's not listed in the Constitution comes down and violates the religious liberties of this Amish farmer. You have the right to participate in commerce. You have the right to your own industry. Like, God says in Genesis chapter 1, verse 28, be fruitful, multiply. You get your first fruits. You get the benefit of your labor, the benefit of your engaging God's creation. This goes to work. This goes to capitalism. This goes to you have the right to have what you produce. You have the right to participate in commerce because we are image bearers of God. We are not subjects of man-made government. As a result of this, extra-constitutional, not in Article 1, Section 8, Food and Drug Administration, they've descended from on high and said that because 2 people died from stuff that was linked to bacteria that is similar to Amos Miller's cheese or his milk, he's somehow guilty, that is a threat to people. Is there something else that people die from more than the number 2 that the federal government could be looking into? If the federal government is really interested in stopping people dying, is there a greater source of death in America than freaking cheese and listeria from an Amish dude in Pennsylvania? Inquiring minds want to know. This is not anything to do with about listeria or people dying. It has everything to do with the fact that Amos Miller is more successful at doing food production God's way, and that's what people want. His private membership association was flanking the agriculture monopoly, the food monopoly. He was bypassing the food systems of the global food supply chain. Do not doubt me. That's why he's being targeted. The solution to this is to get your sheriff on board. The FDA, the CIA, the NSA, the FBI, any of these unconstitutional federal agencies are stopped. They are checked with a sheriff telling them, you can't do that. Y'all guys need to get your Live Local field manuals. You need to put this in action. Amos Miller is a patriot. He is a paragon of how patriots should be fighting and winning and advancing freedom in the 21st century America. Amen. I'm going to play a sped up clip. This happened in New York yesterday, 9/11. There's a little bit of language. Very good value taken away. Commentary follows.
That's not Lucifer.
Even Jesus wouldn't deny a leper. But you deny me because I'm unvaccinated. Right? Did Jesus deny the unvaccinated, the sick, wherever? Did he deny them? And why are you denying me? Aren't you a church? The vaccine is a bioweapon. You've been a member of a church. Let me be a member of this one.
Okay, you want to join?
Let me in. Let me see. I want to see what it's like in there.
Why don't you come when we're not having the service?
No, I'm here for the service.
Why don't you come?
Why am I being treated like some diseased animal? Why am I not allowed to attend the service? Tell me. What about me? Has a church ever discriminated against a sect of people? Ever? Have they ever closed their doors to somebody? Whether they're Taliban or Muslim? No. But if you're unvaccinated, you're worse than all of them.
So there is a congregation in New York City not allowing people inside for 9/11 for services on 9/11 unless they have a medical protocol into their arm. I hate this video so much. Jesus says in Matthew 11:28, "Come unto me, all ye labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am meek and lowly in heart, and ye shall find rest unto your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." I don't care what you have done, who you are, what you look like. Christ can save murderers. Christ can save rapists. Christ can save pedophiles. Christ can save treasonous, homosexual, the most evil people in the world can be saved by the gospel. The gospel of Jesus Christ is that Jesus took our sin. He died on the cross, he was buried, and 3 days later he rose from the grave. His death, his burial, his resurrection. Whatever your sin, whatever your background, whatever you look like, anything about you does not matter. What matters is that Christ shed his blood for your sins. Colossians chapter 3, verse 10 and 11. "And have put on the new man, which is renewed in knowledge after the image of him who created him, where there is neither Greek nor Jew, circumcision nor uncircumcision, barbarian, Scythian, bond nor free, but Christ is all and in all." Whenever you are in Jesus Christ, it does not matter what you look like. It does not matter your language. It does not matter where you've been. It does not matter what you've done. All that matters is Christ, and that is it. Whoever that person was, not letting people into the church, does not worship the Jesus Christ of Scripture. First of all, the reason why I know that is that if you're not letting people into your congregation or your building or to participate in worship of a God you claim is from Scripture because they don't have a medical protocol, the God of Scripture says in Philippians chapter 1:21, "To live is Christ, to die is gain. I am promoted when I die. I should be so lucky." 2 Corinthians 5 verse 8, "To be absent the body is to be present with the Lord." You're going to tempt me with a good time to take me home to my Creator. Paul himself said that he would be more beneficial for him to die and go to heaven, but that he was kept on earth so that he could continue to spread the gospel. The gospel saves. If you're a murderer, if you're a sexual luster, a pornographer, an adulterer, a thief, a murderer, it does not matter what you've done. Christ conquered that sin on the cross. Doesn't matter what you look like. Doesn't matter what your nationality is, what language you speak, what you've done in the past. No barriers to Jesus exist. Hear me, right-wing watch people that are watching my stuff. Hear me clearly. You can come to Christ today. Doesn't matter who you are, what you've done. There's no barriers to Jesus. But yet you've got people pronouncing themselves as someone that's going to protect the flock because these people don't have the medical protocol. If they didn't have the medical protocol and they got everybody sick and everyone died, if you've done your job and those people believe the gospel, then they all go to heaven. What's the danger in dying if you're in Jesus Christ? And this is what the world doesn't understand. The world doesn't understand, and I dare say that a lot of sheep, a lot of people who claim Christ are so gaslit, they're so distracted, and they're deceived because they've put their love in their continued existence. This world is not your home. If you're in Christ, this isn't where you're going to end up. And if you're not in Christ, you are going to die. And you are a sinner. And because you're a sinner, and because you're going to die, you're going to stand before the Almighty. The issue is, did Jesus take your wrath? Did Jesus take your punishment or not? Jesus took my punishment, not because I'm worthy, not because I'm good, not because I've earned it, but because he's loving. The gospel is that you believe that Jesus Christ took the punishment that you deserve because you're a sinner. And he rose from the grave to prove that death is not the end. These people don't believe in Jesus. They need to. Amen. Folks, we keep this ad-free because we want to keep it focused on the gospel. Like we just said, we got to be able to offend anybody by bringing them the gospel because we want to save souls. We don't want to try to win arguments. With that, we'd appreciate any support that you can give us at the livelocal.store link. You become a member at livelocal.store, veteranammo.store, or any of the merchandise that you see that we sell there on the website. That keeps the lights on, keeps people employed. It keeps allowing us to continue to do this content. I appreciate you very much. Please continue to pray for Dad. He takes his new medication on October 7. He's still very sick, and cancer sucks. We hate that very much. Appreciate your time. God bless you. Lord willing, we'll be back tomorrow, September 13. Until then, I'm Jarrin Jackson. I do love America. Don't quit. Never quit. Gospel forward. Go to war.